Welcome to Titi Talk, a music education podcast. I'm Tyler Swig.
And I'm Jordan Smith.
I'm Dr. Martina Vasil. I'm an associate professor at the University of Kentucky. I direct the summer programming there, and I'm president of the Association for Popular Music Education.
Shout out associate professor, tenured. What up, Dr. Vasil? I'm Dr. Bryan Powell. I'm a lowly assistant professor of music education at Montclair State University, and I'm the executive director of the Association for Popular Music Education.
As you can tell from our smiles, this has been a very fun episode to record. We're having a great time today. Stick around for the entire episode because we touch on so many things over the next hour and 20 minutes. I hope you find something you enjoy, and we'll see you at the end.
I guess I should start with I've never actually met Bryan in real life. So
Exciting.
I met him essentially. It's weird to say you met somebody because it's in this digital age, but I took the modern band workshop that was online. And it was like Monday through Thursday. So like 4 to 6 for a couple hours. And you know me, like if this was normally like in person, I would have been like that person that was like walking up when they're like, does anybody have any questions? And I probably like stared at him and be like, yes, I have like so many. So I had to like think on it. Like after the first day, I was like, well, this is awkward, but I was totally into everything he was saying. I just felt like it was one of those moments that I had with Martina, it was like I don't know, glitter went off and all these streamers, metaphorically speaking, because I also met her at our Kentucky Music Conference, like one of those clinics. And I was really bummed out. And I'm not going to say who it was before, an orphan, where there were people in the front row that were like falling asleep and like doing those like where they're like waking themselves up head nods. And I was like, oh, great. Here we are. And I'm like, the end of my 5th year, I think, teaching. And I was feeling like pretty, I don't know, it was stagnant. Like my teaching career felt very stagnant because I'm over there like doing all this stuff with GarageBand and putting beats in my classroom. And the people around me are like, no, that's not what music education is. And Martina walks in. She's got like this cool outfit that like reels me in, totally 90s vibes. And I'm like, okay, I'm like sitting up straight, making sure I don't head nod, fall asleep. And she just like catches the entire room's attention. Like there's no more chairs left. People are standing up and there's crowding around like, who is this lady? Because, like in her, I think like it was in the booklet. It said something about like pop music and Orff in the same sentence. And I was like,
it's very
what?
exciting. Just those words combined is very exciting.
Yes. And it's like, I have to go seek this out. So she immediately catches the room's attention. I don't know if that was like you're doing like the John Cena thing with the recorders and the Tabanos. And yeah, so like that's essentially what reeled me into it. And again, as extroverted as I am, I can also be awkward. And I was like, I got to talk to her. And I waited for like her fan club, to talk through the line. And I'm like standing in the back. I'm like, oh, I'm so awkward, whatever. So I go up and I immediately am just like reeled into her message. And she mentions modern band. And that's like the first seed that was planted. And she was so approachable and the people around her. And so that's when I start getting into, there's a COSA, which is a Kentucky Orff Shoulder Association for Kentucky. And I was like, okay, I think I'm getting closer to my people, maybe. But Tyler and I have like talked about this. We both, the Orff levels, we were kind of had the same attitude where I was like, I'm a percussionist. I don't need to get into all this. But when you mentioned modern band, I'd never heard of that. So yes, in this long drawn out explanation, that's how I essentially came into the paths of both of these cool people.
That's fantastic. So as an outsider, I don't know anything about modern band other than I think it's when you play music with instruments that are not supposed to be in the room. So Bryan, can you elaborate to me or what's the run through of an outsider who hears the word modern band and they go, what's that? How do I do that?
Yeah, sure. So the idea behind modern band is was to add another kind of stream of instrumental music education, and the term modern band was chosen because it felt like it might fit into like jazz band, concert band, marching band, modern band. It's a little less scary than like rock ensemble or pop ensemble. What is popular music? So it does often center around kind of rock band instruments, electric guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, vocals, technology, ukulele. But, you made that comment about like instruments that don't belong. It can be inclusive of any instrument that you want. So I run a rock band or a popular music ensemble. See, I even slip it into there as well. I run a pop music ensemble at Montclair State University where I work, and we have trumpet, we have saxophone, like any instrument is welcome, in addition to electronics and electric guitar and things like that. So the repertoire is generally focused around music that the students choose that often can be popular music as we know it, like currently popular stuff. But it can also be folk songs or songs that students wrote themselves. So some modern bands look like a total rock band, and others look a lot more eclectic, and students are doing their own songwriting, and there's kind of everything in between. So that's why I think there's a lot of overlap between some of the creative elements of ORF and the songwriting and creation that can happen in popular music.
That's fantastic. Did you find that people were doing that without even realizing they were doing that? Where, we had a guitar and a recorder, and when they played together, whoops, we made a modern band.
Yeah, I mean, I think people were doing it for a lot of years, but we weren't talking about it. Like I taught in the New York City public school system, and I started doing a guitar ensemble, and then we added popular music instruments, and then students would kind of play whatever they had. But I totally thought that I was like the only person doing this. I was like, no one else is doing popular music. I taught in East Harlem, and so we did some like Spanish language things that the students would be teaching me about. But I had this is I'm old enough that I was teaching kind of pre Facebook. And so there weren't these ideas about like communities of people doing technology in the classroom or popular music in the classroom. I just kind of thought that I was like making it up because my students liked music, but they didn't really want to play. I'm a trombone player. They didn't really want to play clarinet or trombone or do those kind of traditional things. They wanted to do these other things. And so it was half because I was like, oh, this is really cool. And it was half just because I was like trying to prevent myself from like sinking of like not knowing what I was doing and just trying to do anything that would connect the students to music.
Yeah. And I think that is how I felt. Like I walked in my classroom and it was like, okay, all these tools that I was given in college, and it's not a hit on anybody, it just wasn't working. And you're sitting there like, oh, geez, what do I do? And it was like the most natural thing for me to implement in my classroom, which, again, like when Martina brought that up, which bringing it to Kentucky, I feel like has been a huge thing just to spread that idea, of like teachers that think like that and feel like that. And I guess I was going to ask you, Martina, what made you get passionate to bring that to Kentucky?
Yeah, well, I moved here, so no matter, I guess whatever state I would have moved to, I would have done it.
That's
Oh,
great.
Anyway,
nice. That's
um,
cool. So you were
but
influenced before that, before you got here.
yeah, it all came from teaching middle school general music. Um, and me kind of like desperately trying to do anything that was going to work. Because first of all, I was not prepared for it at all in my undergrad program because it basically went like K through 5 and then ensembles, and my student teaching was the same K through 5 and then high school, nothing in the middle.
I think that
And
really
then
resonates with a lot of people because when I heard middle school general music existed, I was like, my fifth graders are kind of tired of xylophone by fifth grade. How could I possibly extend this to eighth grade?
yeah, and it's and I my first job out of college K through 8, and I was at Catholic schools, and things were still kind of working with the population. Like the kids would kind of go along with it. They still weren't like, I could see like that was the time when like iPods were coming out and they're like starting to seriously curate like their playlists on there. And I was like kind of interested, but I was like, well, my way is the best. Like I'm gonna do my Orff stuff and folk music, and like what's wrong with you? And I was really kind of butting heads with them. And then for some reason, I was in my fourth or fifth year teaching, and I got a new job at a charter school in the middle of the city. And I just thought like I gotta change because like nothing was working. The kids were like not cooperating, and I'm like I need to change. And I just started asking them, like, what do they like? What do they listen to? And it was, they liked Nicki Minaj, and they liked mostly R&B and hip hop. I'm like, oh my God, I know nothing about this. And the first thing I actually did was I taught them salsa dancing because I'm a salsa dancer. And I thought, I knew they liked to dance. I know they like to move. They would like try to teach me things that I would do very poorly, like the pin drop move. So I thought, well, what if I could find like some R&B salsa tracks, which there are a lot of them, and there's some great um, uh, mixes like Neo, So Sick of Love songs, and they kind of put it to a salsa beat. Uh, and they loved it and they ate it up, especially my eighth graders, sixth, seventh, and eighth. I did it 5 through 8, and I taught them what I knew about salsa, and we would do it to the music they liked, and they totally ate it up, and we did a performance. And at the time, I didn't realize I was implementing all these like informal learning techniques, like modeling, giving them time to practice on their own, letting them, fail a little bit on their own or do it with a partner, not like con- directing each step. Like, because when I taught salsa classes, that's the way I would do it. So you're teaching adults, and it's a much more free way, I would say student-centered way, because they're getting to work things out on their own. And from there, I was like, oh, I have my Mac. I have GarageBand on here. I had one Mac. Like, the school didn't have any tech, and I would bring my one MacBook in. And I was like, all right, like, I want you to be able to, I know you're doing beats. You're showing me on your phone. We can't use phones in class, unfortunately. So, like, I had the kids, I'm like, I'll give you time to, like, work on your favorite artists. Like, they were making posters. I know it wasn't, like, the best thing. And then, like, I would rotate the kids who would work with me for, like, 10 minutes at a time or 15 on GarageBand, and actually had, like, a group of kids write a whole rap song. I wish I had the recording. And they performed it. We had, like, every 8 weeks, like, a sharing with parents, and they performed their rap. And then I started, like, adding backbeats to recorder playing, and we would do, like, hot cross buns to, like, a hip hop beat, and we shared that, and it was, like,
Yes.
super cute. And for once, I was like, realizing how little I knew and what actually worked. And that's where, like, this, like, real dissatisfaction with music ed started to come from, an interest in pop music.
That's beautiful.
Is it gratifying to know that all these people with different backgrounds and different preparation for the classroom kind of ended up in the same place of, like, the modern student cares more about popular music than folk music, or they care more about the instruments that apply to the music they listen to, or it's like, as you brought up already, Brian, like the clarinet is not so hip anymore, but being able to play one of those touch drum pads is like the new key to the city.
Yeah, and what's funny is, like, when you talk to anyone else outside of music ed, this is like the most obvious thing ever. You're like, so actually it turns out that students want to make music that they like, and they want to create their own stuff, and they don't want to play and everyone's like, well, obviously, are you just figuring this out? And I'm like, well, we've got this history and this tradition. And again, my daughter's in a band now. She's sixth grade playing flute, and they're playing like not pop tunes, and she likes it and she's fun. So, and I was a band kid. So, it's not really a this is better than that situation. Mm-hmm. I think it's just like the students for whom band works, many of us are probably in that boat. It works, and that's cool, and that's good. And so it's not about like, oh, we've got to get away from that. It's just like, well, that works, but that's a small percentage of the students that it works for. And then all these other students who are musical, have musical identities and are connected to music, but don't want to do the band thing or the choir thing or the orchestra thing. Like, how do we connect with them? And again, it's so obvious that it's almost so simple that we miss it, that they want to connect with things that they want to, and this is how other elements of education work. Constructivist education, students have choice. They're bringing in their outside of school experiences inside of school, but sometimes we miss that opportunity in music ed. And so that's where I feel like music technology and popular music can kind of widen that door to music participation a little bit.
Martina, I have to say that one day I was on Facebook and somebody shared a picture, and it was the University of Kentucky band room, but it was filled with people playing guitar and drum set and ukulele. And I said, what cool thing is going on in that room? Because I've only seen that room filled with marching bands, with sitting band, standing band, maybe a couple of violins. And I was like, what happened at that school where something like this is happening? So the answer is you happened at that school. What's the success been like with this ensemble? Because I can't help but think I would be one of the first people in that room if this class existed while I was there.
Yeah, so what you saw was a modern band training. So pretty much annually, I've been bringing Bryan to campus. Um, and he's kind of my modern band guru here. Like I'm still learning a lot. And we do these 2-day weekends and get teachers to come in, and it's been really interesting because some years I had people like fly in from different states to attend it because I think they didn't have anything nearby. And like Little Kids Rock does a lot of this too, but there's certain regions they just don't get to. And I mean, Kentucky's one. Like we never had a Little Kids Rock program. Like I think Bryan, they'll target certain cities, right?
Yeah, if we have funding from like a foundation that's based in a certain city, then we do trainings in that city. But we're not yet able to open it up to just anywhere in the United States that would want it.
Yeah. So it's great, for 2 days. Bryan kind of takes them through the Modern Band 101 and kind of the basics on everything and seeing what people can apply to their classroom. Because I've had choral directors come, band directors, administrators, art supervisors, and the general music people. And that was very surprising and pleasing to me that clearly this is a need beyond what I thought it was, like just middle school general music. Like clearly there are other teachers that are interested in this. Clearly some things not working in a way that they're seeing too many kids excluded from music, or even in their own classrooms that something isn't quite clicking with students. But I mean, I would love for that to be a real thing in my curriculum. I kind of do it with my secondary methods course. My students form their own popular music ensemble. So I've kind of sneaked it in to my curriculum, and nobody cares about that because it doesn't mess with their schedules. So
That's awesome. I know the phrase alternative ensemble started like 5 years ago, and this incredible visionary named Ann Fennell came around and said alternative ensemble sounds like a punishment. It sounds like prison for kids who didn't join band. And she then coined the phrase innovative ensemble. And of course, it's inspiring to hear that instead of alternative. So would you consider Rock Band to absolutely be an innovative ensemble as opposed to an alternative ensemble?
I guess so. I mean, it's just an ensemble to me. And we actually have a rock band at the University of Kentucky. It's an elective, unfortunately. I wish it was a required part for music ed majors, but it was
For sure.
run by TAs for years, teaching assistants, and we finally got a new professor hired who's an audio engineer, and he runs that class, and it's been really fun to see him post about it. And he and I talk a lot, and we share equipment, and I just feel like I finally have an ally in the School of Music who's doing the same things as me. So we support each other. Like he's run sound for me when my students have performed, and so at least I feel like we're taking baby steps toward the right direction. I think Bryan, you already have, is that a part of your curriculum?
Yeah, so it's going to be part of the future. We're in the process at Montclair State University, which is in northern New Jersey, of putting in a recording arts and production degree for students who want to work in the studio and want to kind of do those things. But the exciting thing is, from the music education side, is that it's open, of course, to our music ed students. So yeah, for this semester, for the first time, like our popular music ensemble is a class that people could register for with a teacher and gigs and those sort of things. And speaking about names, there is no kind of good name. Like people use non-traditional ensemble a lot, and that just messages that like there are traditions in music ed, and then anything else is non-traditional. Even though like an African drumming ensemble would be non-traditional, even though there's a lot of traditions around African drumming that go back and predates
No.
the invention of the saxophone or whatever that would be in a traditional ensemble. So, terminal at University of South Florida, they call their ensemble a vernacular music chamber ensemble. And that's because they try to get like rock band passed or something, and people are like, no, we can't do that. And then they called it a vernacular music chamber ensemble, and people are like, well, that sounds good. We know what that's like. And some people use the word vernacular or popular music or whatever. But yeah, and then at our university, we've put in a popular music a class called teaching popular music, and we have a popular music techniques. And because we've been able to put them in as an option but not a requirement, it doesn't, ruffle feathers. Also, I will say at Montclair State, my colleagues have been immensely supportive, and I don't battle a lot of the same kind of like we're stuck here and we can't be progressive that maybe some other institutions deal with. But I feel like Martina actually has a chapter in a book coming out about this. That like make change where you can make change in your own classes, and then maybe that can spread to like, okay, then you're doing this collaborative thing, and then your department can do this thing, and then you can talk to with another school and do something collaborative, and then you can think about your audition requirements and how they're providing barriers to students who would maybe play those instruments but have to audition, and then you can start really making change. You just got to start somewhere, and so whoever's listening to our chat here, make change within your own school with your own students, and then like work out from there, and you'll be surprised. Like change happens slowly and then kind of all at once sometimes, but you just got to get started somewhere.
Yeah, well, speaking of like baby steps for the baby steps is what I've said lately. How did you all start collaborating what you do? And also maybe mention to the listeners how your organization, the APME, is it American
Association for Popular
Association
Music Education.
Yeah. I can't like all these acronyms. I love it. I always memorize them by like APME, and I can say that confidently. Just kidding. All right. Yes.
You did.
How did you get started in this? Like, what is it? Because I think when I saw that, essentially I kind of associated that with modern band at the time. Like I guess just not knowing what the organization was. So maybe if you can explain to the listeners what all that entails. And shout out to Dr. Martina Vasil for being the president.
And
I think
Bryan's
that's awesome.
Executive director.
Okay. Yes.
The
yes.
top two
yes.
leaders here.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the top 2-tier people. I just saw you recently were
we're sending only our best people for you, Jordan.
Thank you.
I think Bryan should answer this one because he's been with the org from the very beginning.
Yeah, sure. I'll go quickly, and then actually the first time I ever met Martina was at this conference, and she can kind of talk about her experience getting involved. But yeah, as popular music in other countries, popular music in schools and in higher education has been around and present a lot longer than what we do here, because they don't have the same marching band traditions that we have, the same kind of military music traditions. If you look at where our church and aristocracy and military, where our traditions come from in music ed in the States. But it was relatively new in the United States as a degree program. And so what was possible is our university started including popular music more often, but there wasn't kind of like me teaching popular music in East Harlem thinking I'm the only one doing this. There's no community of support. These institutions wanted to get together with other institutions, colleges and universities, and figure out like, hey, what are you doing? What are best practices? How do we share our experiences? And so they got together, formed the Association for Popular Music Education. And at that time, it was mostly kind of the popular music universities that you've heard of, Berkeley, University of Southern California, Miami, Belmont, NYU, etc. And so I joined because they were looking for someone who had some experience with nonprofit management, but was also into popular music and could kind of help grow the nonprofit. And what we started seeing as we started offering conferences is more and more colleges and universities started coming who were offering popular music degrees. But the biggest contingent that started to increase was K-12 teachers and pre-service music teacher educators who were using popular music in their classrooms to bridge that gap, Jordan, as you said, between school music and like music in society. And so we started seeing a lot more K-12 teachers, a lot more university professors who are in music education coming to the APME conference. And so it's this really cool combination of university popular music performance professors and the music educator side, both connecting with popular music in different ways. And our biggest kind of outward facing event is we run a conference every year, shout out June 1 through 4 in Detroit, connecting to the Motown and Detroit scene this year in 2022, or next year. That'll be our next conference. And we get to meet cool people. The first time I actually met Dr. Martina Vasil was she was not yet Dr. Vasil, and she came to the APME conference in Miami to kind of see what it was about and present and connect and find some people. And we met there, and she did a session the next year at Berkeley. And like you were saying earlier, Jordan, I don't know if maybe it was before we hit record. She had everyone up and they were moving and they were dancing and they were connecting and doing these great things. And so we said, oh, it'd be great to get her involved more. And then she joined our board of directors. And then this last year, she was elected president of the association. What up? So please refer to her as President Vasil from now on.
We put the in front of it? The?
Yeah, the president. Vasil. So it's a continued organization, and we're continually looking for how do we collect resources and share those out? How do we build community? How do we support people for whom they're just dipping their toe in the water, trying to see what's possible, all the way to people who have been doing this forever, but are now just kind of connecting with the larger popular music education community.
Wow.
That was excellent. I know. See,
Yeah,
Tyler, I'll
before.
say this.
I think you've said that before.
Well, I had to say it twice here because my audio kept cutting out, so I've got lots of practice.
You went, kick them kids off the internet. Your neighbor's like
Pretty
yelling,
much.
get off the internet.
Of course, my kids are probably upstairs like doing beat making, and I'm like, knock it off. I'm talking about beat make. Oh, never mind.
Music's
the
for the
beat loud.
birds.
Yeah, let's be honest. They're playing Minecraft. I don't know what they're doing. Well, it's fine.
It's like, Tyler, I've not seen you like smile. I think like this is the one podcast where he's like, yes. And I told him, I was like, these are going to be your people. You just don't know it yet. Like
100% accurate. 100% accurate. And I just see such a demand for it now because when we talk about traditional and non-traditional, our traditional ways didn't involve COVID. So the new normal, this seems like such a beautiful fit of I can't do recorders and everyone's thrilled. So I need to do more ukulele. And it's like, if I need to do more ukulele, I'd like to have a path, a journey that we can go on. And people have come up with ideas, but to say, hey, we're learning pop songs is, I think, the most exciting thing a student could hear. Here's ukulele. Today we're learning Bruno Mars. And they go, whoa, we're not just like playing C, D, E in a row over and over again, as I do on the xylophone. But we're actually going to play some, Count on Me or something like that. So I just find that the timing seems to be wonderful as well. Granted, as you brought up many times, it's not brand new, but this maybe seems like the time where people can rebuild their programs around, hey, you own a guitar, bring it in. And I'm sure you find yourself, I don't know, does it seem opportune right now to convert schools that are having budgetary issues, or maybe they're coming into new money because of the CARES Act? Do you see any kind of boom right now because of COVID for either of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, a lot of, let's just talk about our band choir and orchestra directors who's historically, and I'm painting with a broad brush, there are band choir and orchestra directors who are composing with their students, who are integrating technology, but historically they haven't had to do that. And when everything went online, I started seeing a lot of band directors and choir using Soundtrap, getting their students creating, because they almost in some ways didn't have another choice. And so they started integrating technology. They started to allow their students to collaborate, or they created, some just created virtual choirs of the piece that they would have done anyway. But a lot of them were kind of building down or breaking down the silos between why teach band and that's choir and this is technology and those are different things. And it kind of was all together. I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially those people who are doing popular music. They're like, oh yeah, I'm already used GarageBand, and so now we'll use BandLab or we'll use Soundtrap. My students will be composing original songs. We're going to do songwriting. We're going to do this beat making. Who had already doing popular music totally were ready for the opportunity of going virtual, even though a lot of us were thrown there. But I think the exciting opportunity is we have so many teachers that started integrating technology. And what I'm interested most, the thing that's most on my mind right now is that as we go back to in-person instruction, what are the that we can hold on to from technology about student creating, connecting with music that's relevant to them, technology. So just because I'm doing a concert band doesn't mean that my level for repertoire and I rehearse them because we're back in person and I don't have to do those things anymore. What are the things that we can hold on to so that we can kind of connect the things that we're doing with all these opportunities that move forward? So I think there was definitely a bridge that was there during COVID of expanding and connecting. Now is the time where we're kind of looking around to see, like, what are we going to hold on to? What's possible moving forward so that we don't just abandon all the things technological that we did during COVID because we had to, because we can return to normal, whatever that looks like.
I think all of that needs to go on a shirt. I say that every time that I hear something. I'm like, yes, print it all of the little words
That's
like on all the sleeves.
Yeah, right.
That'd be a big shirt, and I'm a big guy, so I wear big shirts. But yeah, that'd be a long shirt.
Do you all see a place for this, maybe at a statewide level, or not even just little areas of people doing this? Do you see this becoming something that could be a model that could be at schools, that could be classes that eventually are offered at schools, not just based off maybe like one teacher here or there, but maybe at a university level to push out to those places? Or is that kind of the intention of modern band in that way?
I mean, it's a cycle, and it has to be adaptable. Like, I don't think we're ever going to have a one size fits all thing the way that band, orchestra, choir have found their way into the curriculum. But I think each school is going to find a different way to do it. Like, I know in the West, mariachi bands are so huge, and that's addressing a large, amount of the population. I mean, you could technically say that's modern band because you're taking the music that students prefer, and it's like non-traditional instruments. But I don't know. I just keep thinking my dissertation was looking at teachers who brought pop music in different ways, and it was so different. That's why I say I think it's hard to say that it's going to become a template. One school, the teacher took like his music appreciation history class and turned it into music industry, and it completely snowballed. He has like 6 different electives now. Music industry 1 is like the foundational course, open to anybody, and because he did that, enrollment shot up in all the other ensembles because kids who thought they weren't musical were suddenly musical. And so that's like in his curriculum. Another woman I talked to is at a K-12 all girls school, and she already had like 7th to 8th grade general music, and she turned the one into she called it pop rocks, and they did like all Orff covers, and then the 8th graders did a whole year of songwriting. So that wasn't called modern band, but it was called pop rocks and songwriting.
So maybe the movement of taking your area and what you know applies to the people around you, or maybe the students in that way.
I think it's seeing your student population and creating a musical experience for them, or for the majority of them that maybe aren't getting any music education at all.
I think that's huge. I think you really nailed on a ton of things just there about locally, thinking about the students that are directly in front of you. But then when you hear those success stories, you think there's got to be so many people that would benefit from that. And I know we jump straight to everybody should, but would probably be happy if just a good amount of people did, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like, so the mariachi band thing, I was talking to Tyler, and he was just like, we were talking about kind of like, before we started the podcast, like our areas, what was popular and what was heavily influenced. And it's like, I mean, like Kentucky, in a way, marching band is really big in this area, and some of that has to do with the climate and just like what's traditionally been done. And then Tyler was telling me, he's like, well, up in this area, you've got a lot of mariachi bands. And I was very surprised to hear that, because I think that what had been exposed to me was just a very small little speckle of what was actually happening in that area. And so I think that's a really neat thing to see how they've incorporated generations of playing and at school in that aspect.
And I think climate's just a big part of it.
A couple quick things. One, right, I think the opportunity is, it needs to be, if we're talking about popular music in schools, it needs to be something that can be scalable, and it's not limited to those of us who have experience as popular musicians. Like Jordan, not everyone's in a band with their friends that plays gigs. If we're going to do this, we need to figure out, then this is something that the nonprofit organization Little Kids Rock is working on, is how do we make this scalable? So like Tyler said, like, we're going to play some like Bruno Mars tunes. Well, here's 3 chords, and with 3 chords, I can play 1,000 songs. With 3 notes on the recorder, I can play Hot Cross Buns and most of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Not Little Lamb, not that part, but the rest of it I can play it. But with 3 notes on the guitar
dead.
or the
I'm
uke, we can play all of those
That one
songs.
got
And
me.
so there's so many opportunities that some of the work that I do with workshops is like when I go to Kentucky, a lot of these people that come to UK for this workshop not in rock bands, they're not popular musicians themselves, but it's just messaging to them like you're going to sit alongside your students like a learner, and that's a good thing. You don't have to be expert. You're going to learn some chords and you're going to facilitate songwriting performance opportunities. There's a lot of ways to allow who aren't the expert to make those connections and to do that. And then it should be reflective of the students you're working with. In New York City, most of my students didn't like country music. But you go literally an hour north of the city, what we call in the city upstate, which is anything that's not New York City. And a lot of students like country music. And so it shouldn't just be me, the teacher, picking the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Rolling Stones tunes. It needs to be, in communication with the students. And so programs can be reflective of the students that we're working with, and they should be, so that it's not a one-size-fits-all replication, but the replication is a pedagogy of understanding that you don't have to be the expert in everything to be able to facilitate those opportunities.
I like that. So would you say maybe like modern band being more of like a movement rather than specifically saying you have to follow these rules?
Yeah, I think it's part of a larger movement that's been around for a while. Like a lot of people who are involved with modern band are like, yeah, this is the movement. And I think and then there are people who are like, I've been doing this for years and I just didn't call it modern band, or we've been doing these things, or trying to integrate and technology into our course room. So I think there's a larger movement, and it's about inclusion, equity, diversity, access, musical identity, all of those things. And so I think it's part of that, and it's the approach, it's the pedagogical approach, and then connecting with music that students want to do. The end goal of any music teacher's classroom probably isn't that all your students become music majors and professionals. Like, we want them to develop a love for music that allows their life to have more meaning. And if we can do that for more students because they're participating in a musical experience that's relevant for them, then that's a great end goal. So again, not as a replacement of band, choir, and orchestra, but in addition to a music technology lab, a rock band after school, a modern band class, any way to get more students playing music, I think is the ultimate goal.
Boom. That was good.
It was great.
That's on the back of the t-shirt.
That's on the back.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe.
That one's in
part
smaller
two.
font on the back. So a lot of times, and I heard this from Dr. Dan Moore at the University of Iowa. He said his whole mission statement is to create lifelong music appreciators. And I thought that was really interesting, because to me that was so. In my head, I was like, no, we're creating musicians who are going to go and do great things. And it kind of was the first time I heard, like, we're really trying to grab as many people as possible. And so with the ORF setup, which I love, I teach them xylophone. And after they leave the 5th grade, they may never see a xylophone again. And then I teach them jumbie jams. And after they leave 5th grade, they may never see a steel drum again in their life. And it's like this ensemble just kind of has this, whether intentional or not, it's access to instruments that really don't disappear. You know what I mean? A ukulele is always at the music store. A guitar is almost in everyone's house in some way or another. Where I find, like, a lot of times the line I love to use with my young piano students is that when my parents made me learn piano, their line was, one day you'll be at a party and you'll impress a bunch of people when you can play a song on that piano. And I hated them then for saying it, and now I love them for it. And now I say it to kids. I go, one day you're going to be at a party, and there's going to be a piano. And no good party I've ever been at has had a piano. But with that said, if there's a guitar there, that's what we're teaching. Like, if it would be, we can circumvent needing private piano lessons if they can learn those chords on the guitar, the ukulele, the bass, any instrument that is valuable to their community. It will likely be around for the rest of their life, and they don't have to go to a specialty store and find that instrument they used to play.
Yeah, and it's building confidence in themselves. I think our society kind of places too much emphasis on being the best at something, especially with all these competition shows. And I think there's been so many surveys about like how Americans just think they can't sing. I know I've said it myself because it's built in that way that, you're only a singer if you're in choir or if you get that solo, and forcing kids to sing when they're not comfortable yet. There's a lot of like abusive practices in education, and it needs to be a little more gentle, and like realizing like you can crush a kid's soul by like a certain one look or one sentence instead of just like providing opportunities for growth. And you don't have to be perfect right away. And everybody has musicality. Everyone is born with music in them. It's one of the oldest forms of expression that humans have. It's across the world. Um, and I think this is what the popular music does, because you're instantly making a connection that I think I value your music by allowing it into my classroom. That translates to them, I value you. Um, and I think all of this is a part of, yes, appreciation for music, but also building their confidence that they're allowed to be a part of it. It's not just like reserved for this special class of people because they did band in 12th grade.
Yeah,
that's
well, it's meeting
huge.
them where they're at. I think is a big thing is like, you say you could crush somebody. It's funny. I read something the other day saying you have no idea what people are thinking about in terms of like maybe you said something to them and it was just really offhanded. And it's like you have no idea how many times they replay that through their head. Maybe it's a daily thing. Maybe it's something every time they think of you. And I think it's really sad when you think of teachers that ruin passions for kids at maybe you're 10 years old and you love art and your art teacher just totally embarrasses you in front of people. Well, it's not that they hate art from there on out. It might be that that person that was supposed to be the facilitator of it made it such a bad experience that they associated with that. And I say that with music. I went to like 10 different schools as a child because my dad was in the military. And I absolutely hated music class from one of them because of the way I was treated. And it was really funny you bring up singing because I remember, I don't even know why I did this. I think it was just like, that awkward age, you're uncomfortable. I remember being in fourth grade and I took like my hand and I was doing this because we had to sit at desk and I'm like singing out on one of these books and I'm singing, but I'm not showing anybody in there. I'm actively singing, which is like surprises me to this day that I'm a music teacher. And I got called out big time. And then she made a big deal of it. I'm gonna talk to you after class. And all the kids are out in the hallway, and she's just saying, everybody's doing their homework. You're not doing your homework, and just making me feel like a fool for doing this. And funny enough, that replayed in my head every day I went to music. I thought of that, and I ended up moving schools, moving where this teacher was like the nicest, most wholehearted person I ever met. And that is what reeled me into, hey, I'd like you to join band. And it's because I liked her music class so much. And it's like, it's what you're facilitating, And I think that's the biggest thing is with me with the modern bandits, I got on this track because it's like I got to experience this as an adult in a rock band. And I want to share that with my students. I want to share the things that I know. And then the bigger part of that is just a community of people that are like-minded that want to share that with kids, knowing that, hey, we're facilitating these things for them. If that makes sense.
We all know people that say things like, "Oh, I don't have a musical bone in my body," and that is either because society has messaged that, or at some point they're like, "Well, I might like music," and then they look at school music offerings and they're like, "Well, that's not the thing that I'm into, so maybe music isn't for me." So if you have a teacher who does that negative experience, of course we can turn people off. But there's also students who never signed up for that because they're just like, "Oh, that's not the thing that I want to do," and so then they start thinking, "Well, I'm not musical because I know what school music looked like, and that wasn't for me. So maybe this is not what I'm going to do." And so I think, right, finding community, valuing. You talked about Tyler, music appreciators. John Kratis talks about embracing. Amateurism in the best sense of that word. An amateur is someone who does something for the love of doing it, not because they're being paid. And don't we all want to have musical amateurs in our classroom, people who engage in music because they love it and not because it's their major or not because it's part of their degree track or to get a good grade, but just like they love it. And when we think of musical amateurism in the States, we're like, no, we don't like amateurism. We want professionalism and excellence. But imagine how different approach to music education would be if our goal was just to foster musical amateurism and have students who did it because they just love doing it. Like that would be a really great outcome. And then it'd be easy to think about inclusion. It'd be easy to think about access and diversity. It'd be because the quality of our program would be on how diverse it was, how inclusive it was, not did we get a superior rating at festival, you know? So I think it's the mind frame is really important for all educators. Think about what do we value and how do we kind of project that to our students.
I've heard kind of two references to how band has like a state level competition of who's the best, which really lines up with Martina's talking about how we have this desire to be the best, and we have it at almost every level. Is there a plan for a honor modern band, or does that defeat the purpose?
Well, hasn't NAFME done it? So I'm actually planning something now. I've been talking with our exec director of the Kentucky State because Florida did something like this, but it's non-competitive. And that's the whole thing, is that you're inviting students who want to cover popular music, write popular music. What Florida did is that they had students audition, you know, it was all during COVID. And the point of it was collaboration. So the students would like, oh, I have this riff. Oh, I'll go with you. And they recorded their compositions together. I think for them, it was all original music. I love that framework because I think that's a inviting environment that allows what popular music does best, which is creating new compositions, you know. I'm not sure how the modern band is run through NAFME and
yeah, so there's it's just there's both sides of the spectrum, right? So it's like in some ways popular music education is disrupting the system, but in other ways it's kind of becoming a part of the system as well, and that's how it's going to function best. Like if it's only after school clubs and at community centers and it's not in the school, then it's never really going to proliferate. So there is an all national honors modern band that is auditioned, and we're seeing more and more city honor bands or state level honors modern band. In fact, there's going to be one, New York City high school honors. They've had like honors ensembles for years, and this coming year for the first time they're going to have an honors modern band. And I'm directing it, and one of the fun opportunities is kind of shout out to me. One of the fun opportunities is disrupting. Yeah, I need a sleeves. I'll put it on the sleeves. Is how we think about that. So normally in an honors ensemble, the director chooses the repertoire, the ensemble committee buys the music, and then they send it to the student, and it says, "Here's the music we're going to play." Well, and that's how all the other honors ensembles work in New York City. But for my modern band, I said, I'm not going to be the one choosing the songs. The students are going to choose them. So once the students are selected, and let's try to get it from as many schools as possible, and let's get MCs and DJs, and it's not just kind of rock band instruments. But then I'm going to have a conversation with the students, and we're going to do an original song that they write or that they've written and that they bring to the group. No other honors ensemble is writing original music for performance, but that's so important for what we're doing with popular music ensembles. So yeah, as soon as the ensemble is they're sending in a video for auditions, and as soon as we select that, then I'm meeting as a group, and then I'll take myself out of that group chat because they'll probably use some technology that I've never heard of to communicate with each other. And then these students are going to choose the songs that they're performing. They're going to create their original song. So it's in one way like we're becoming part of the system, but we're also, you know, it's not about competing against other popular music ensembles to see who gets first. You know, Jordan, you talked about earlier, like not competing against others, but just competing to be, you know, the best you can be. And I think that that's a fine thing. You know, we want to be the best that we can be. And so when we've, the Association for Popular Music Education, we have a student festival. And when we work with these groups, you work with a clinician who's just trying to work with you as a group, but it's not about, well, you scored a 4 and they scored a 3, or it's not about competing in that way. It's just about working with these ensembles to give them ideas of things that they can incorporate. So I think that popular music education needs to be a part of the system because there are some students, especially in lower SES schools, like where many of us have taught, that if it's not part of the school day, they're not going to be able to get exposed to it because they have They have to do childcare for their younger siblings after school. Or I've had students who have to work jobs on the weekends and they can't join marching band to go to rehearsals on Tuesdays and Thursdays because they have to work a job. So it's important, I think, to be a part of the regular school day and to bring it in there. But we also have opportunities to kind of disrupt the traditional system, so to speak.
Can I go back and pretend to be in high school and be a part of this? That first off, that sounds amazing. Like the fact that some students will have that, it's almost like a goal, you know. It's like whenever you're working on something, it's nice to have someone to play to, and it's nice to have something to share or to be around like-minded people. And I'm very curious to see, you know, how that takes off, because I think that is the other perfect element that's missing, because you've got kids that are driven by competition or wanting to work towards a goal of winning something. But I think you have those other students that are, you know, they're just there to hang out. They're there to be around like-minded people, to express themselves, and to have that to facilitate, I think is huge. And that's one thing I like about ORF is you're given these boundaries, and it's so much more comfortable to have somebody that's a professional in front of you that's helping guide you through this. And so I don't know, I'm just excited for you and to see where that goes.
Is there like an ultimate ensemble day? Is there going to be like we're all meeting in Nashville and 700 people are going to play Smoke on the Water? Like, is that in the future by any chance?
But we see that with now, like people get together with 50 drum kits and they play like, you know, the Foo Fighters tune or whatever. And there's some like, there was one in New York City. It was a guitar organization and I'm blanking on the name now. But that was the kind of thing. It was like your ukulele meetups, but kind of on a massive schedule. And they would just project huge and everyone would just sing and play along. And there's power in that because it's like, yeah, you know, 3 chords on the ukulele. Come, I'm going to teach you a 4th chord, and then you can play 1,000 songs. Like any more than 4 chords is like jazz music. We don't need that. But 3 or 4 chords, that's all you need. And then we can play songs. We can create together. You can have a communal experience. So I feel like let's do something in Kentucky. All come out. We'll have a massive meetup. You know, we'll make it happen. We'll all show up to Jordan's house. If you're listening to this, come to Jordan's place.
Come to Jordan's house.
We're gonna have a gig and we're gonna have a mass music situation. It's gonna be good.
Listen, y'all want a gig? I got y'all gigs. And also, if I can just say that in my like heart of hearts, I just would love to have like a giant shoegaze genre jam session. You know, get that one. I can't do it with my hand right now. I'm trying to work on this, but you know, just keep that shape, the same shape up and down the board, and you just shoegaze it up.
I'll bring my pedals and we'll make it happen. Let's
Please.
go.
See, I'm thinking like a Kentucky football halftime show where 800 people run out with a ukulele and play something fun.
It's like,
People
what
in the
do they
back.
call it?
It'll start in a basement. It'll work its way to this field.
The flash mob, flash ukulele mob.
I would love that.
There's already a ton of conferences that do ukulele jams, and that's brought me a lot of joy when I see that, because that's easy. It's easy to throw a ukulele in your bag and take it through the airport.
Yes.
So at least that's already around. I see it at not just 8 p.m. We don't have jams at 8 p.m. actually beyond the student festival. We need to do more
We
of that.
did in at MTSU. We had a jam.
You had it at Berkeley too. I remember the stage was open.
Oh yeah, and people would just
Yeah.
come play music. And
Yeah.
and one of the opportunities is like how people feel about ukulele. It's safe, it's approachable, a few chords. That's how I feel about guitar, even though it's bigger. And we can feel that way about the drum kit. Like if I can, without hitting my mic, if I can do like a simple rock beat, or if I can do one triad shape on the keyboard, I can play every chord there is, a triad chord. Sometimes I gotta move my finger up for the F sharp when I'm playing a D major chord or whatever. But like those simple approaches, that can allow it. Same thing with bass. If I can just play the roots, and most songs are 3 chords, so I'm just playing 3 notes and then I'm going to rhythmically play them. Okay, now I'm playing the bass. There's so many ways to make this approachable. It's unlike trombone, bassoon, clarinet, where you've got to practice for years to get a good tone and figure out what you're doing. There's such easy access to some of these instruments. So I think ukulele is the safe thing now in elementary general, and I would love to see, same thing with music tech. It's like, oh, I've got a grid pattern, or I've got I've got all my toys just off screen. But I'm gonna do some finger drumming, and then I'm gonna start there, and then I'm gonna add some lyrics, and then I'm gonna create a melody, and like we can start small and then expand from there, because so much of this can be accessible for people who haven't had experience with it before.
Yes. And, I'm going to say as a side note, even though there's people that aren't as interested in wind instruments in high school, like learning those crafts. I'll say this, like at the age I'm at now, everybody appreciates it. If somebody's like ever wants to come over and they have like a trumpet, my whole band is like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Because it's just that nice timbre to add. So I just wanted to say that, just to put it out there that I still love those instruments. It's just where they need to be at. And
Yeah.
Martina, I'm
And
also saying you're going to bring your clarinet over sometime.
and they can be inclusive. Like I said, my rock band right now, I've got a trumpet, I have a soprano sax, I have an alto sax, and it's like play anything you want, bring it in. And then we work on the approaches. I had a clarinet player in my rock band, and she was so music staff dependent that I was like, I don't know, just play. And when you find a note that works, hold on to that note and then find another note. And I was trying to get her to develop her ear. And she was so like, can you tell me what key we're in? Can I write the notes down? And I was like, yeah, fine. Like, I'm not going to say like, no, you can't use traditional music staff notation, but we started there. She wrote out some stuff, wrote out her parts. She figured it out. And eventually she built up the conference where she could come and just, create some things or play
Just
by
jam.
ear. Yeah. Well, we never quite got to the jam with her. She was still, because she had been raised like many of us, just like so dependent on the music. So we've got to meet students where they are. And she was like, had that dependency. I'm like, well, that's where you are, and I'm going to meet you there. And then we're going to work this way. So yeah, all instrument. And I think that might be the future of music. We see that with popular music now. It's like, well, Taylor Swift is doing these like EDM beats, and well, most recently like folk, folklore and Evermore and stuff. But like we're breaking down some of these genre specific silos of like, it doesn't have to just be, well, rock does this and country does that, and we can kind of connect these things. And I'd love to see music go there in the future, that it's not just band is here and we don't sing in band and then choir's over there, and that's where the singing happens, because that's like dividing music into these like false binaries or whatever the third thing is. Just like more music making, whatever that looks like. If it's sea shanties and if it's uke jams and if it's tech things, like that's the future. I think just everything kind of being welcomed, and we start there. Yeah,
Yes.
Exactly.
I think that's exactly where I want that to go. It's just all the things for all the things.
And that affects the teacher education too, because the more I talk to people, it's like we have to prepare jack of all trades. And a lot of our music ed programs aren't that. They're so specified. And then students come out into the real world and realize they have to become a jack of all trades. Like, I haven't touched my clarinet in 6 years. I'm going to sell it. Like, that's not how I express myself musically anymore. It had a time and a place. I don't regret it. But honestly, a lot of time was kind of wasted in there, because by the time I wanted to be a teacher, and by the time I got in the classroom, like I wish I would have had more time on my guitar and on ukulele and learning these other instruments. Like they made us learn all the band and orchestra instruments, but none of these, other.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's a big frustration for me, is we are very much like not preparing them for the realities of the world. They're only preparing them for these very like high achieving high school programs where very few exist,
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that along with that is, I'm not like, I don't know, calling anybody out, but I'll say this: music praxis. I take it the first time and it shows me, there's this part on there where it's like the music technology, and there's this graph, and it was like, what type of microphone is this? And I'm like, what is this? I have no idea. This looks like a math grid on here. I don't know what this graph is, and I'd never seen that in my life. And I mean, of course, after that I go and I figure these things out, or especially if it applies to my life. Like now to know, oh, I know what an omnidirectional microphone is, but to say that I was ever taught that in a music course, I can't say that I was. Or it was asking, stuff about MIDI and things about music notation software. And what do you do if you're troubleshooting this? And that might be super easy for somebody that needs to use that. But I think that, the jack of all trades thing, it's like, even whenever I was teaching marching band, it's not just about teaching anymore. It's like, you got to learn how to work a sound system. You have to learn how to troubleshoot a sound system. Okay, now you got to hook up your Mac and work out main stage. And it's like, that is a whole another industry in itself. And so I think, along with what you're saying, it's like the guitar. Why wasn't that something that's a part of curriculum, everywhere, where it's like, what a useful instrument to have? And I don't know, I just hope that I see that in the future branch out more for music educators as well as students.
You're going to need to bring us back for a series of podcasts, because if the goal was actually preparing music teachers for the jobs that exist, we would be rethinking the keyboard class. We would be rethinking the music theory sequence in Theory 3 and 4. We'd be rethinking a lot of classes that just exist, and kind of that's the thing that's always happened. Because 100% you're correct. Like, you need to graduate knowing how to set up a PA system, because even if you're an elementary general person and you're putting on an assembly, you need to know how mics work and a mixing board, and you need to know what to do with the faders, and you need to know the different types of microphones and why you would use one in one instance and one in another. And the amount of time spent in a practice room would decrease. And I enjoyed playing in the large ensembles in college, so I'm not saying that we would need to get rid of those, but we would need to rethink, all right, Theory 4, do we need Schenkerian analysis? Do we need tone rows? Do we need like serialism? Or could we repurpose those 3 credits to do something around the vernacular popular music skills? I tell my students all the time, like, the important things for you to be a music teacher, being able to connect with other human beings is number 1, period. How good you are at the trumpet is like 6th or 7th, truly. Like that. And I understand how we set up our experiences in the university. But right, we spend time dedicated to doing certain things that aren't actually in service of us becoming music teachers. It's in service of us playing like in the ensemble for the university. It's in service of other things. And so, right, if we were actually thinking like, all right, we have 120 credits and we're going to structure them, and the only goal is to prepare you to be a music educator and be as successful as possible, we would really rethink, do we need 2 semesters only looking at one version of music history from Europe from the 18th century? Probably not. Like, that's not the thing that's best preparing you to be a music teacher. Do we want to understand music history? Yes. So anyways, it would be interesting as like an activity to think through, like, how do we really prepare students, and how do we spend our time, and what are the experiences that would be valuable? Because I think we'd end up with something very different than what we have now.
Oh, for sure. And I think, and I thought about that when I was taking that modern band training with you, is, the way that you were speaking, the way that you were explaining things, it was just like, okay, this is coming from someone that has had all these professional experiences in, like, let's say somebody is a master marching band teacher or choir or band, this or that. It's like you're taking people. I always tell my students, something that took me 10 years to learn, I can teach you in 10 minutes. And it's starting to realize how much maybe you had to go through in college that maybe wasn't necessary by like the end of today. And I don't know, I think of it in terms of it, kind of like Martina said, how much time has been wasted on this, or, I always used to think that in college, why am I doing the same thing that the performance majors are having to do as far as ensembles? And how am I supposed to find time to go watch other teachers do these things or find those things out whenever you're so busy that you don't have time for that, and to not even know that you would need these tools from people that are actually doing it. So I don't know. I have like a whole nother rant about that definitely could be like a part 2, because I've done a lot of thinking about that lately, where it's just like, I'm lucky to have the experiences that I've had. And I think that's why I want to share them with people, where it's like, you don't need to waste so much time stressing yourself out and form an analysis. I promise you, I don't use that nearly as much as you think. In terms of Neapolitan chords and getting on to crazy stuff, it's like, yeah, I want to learn how do most pop songs work, because that's what you're listening to every day. That's what you're trying to do with students. And that was something that I wish I had a lot more of. And it kind of felt like it was, I guess, shunned away in the music world, where it's like popular music was bad or it was frowned upon, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of elitism built into it. I mean, all of our music schools are based on the European Conservatory, which was meant to produce musicians to play in the orchestra, which is like 1% or less of jobs that are available in the United States today. Like, it's so overwhelming to think about shifting such a historical institution, but we can do it if we just like start to like build the cracks in the foundation and kind of add extensions. I don't know how to do metaphors,
It's like I was thinking the show, like, where are my words at? Blah blah blah. But you know what I mean? Yeah, it's
Yeah, and I think if we just keep asking ourselves, what are what are the experiences that we need from pre-service music teacher education? What are the experiences that we need to prepare them to be teachers in the classroom and let that guide things? And it's easy for me to advocate for experiences that are different than the norm because I said, well, I understand that's your goal. My goal is to prepare them for the jobs that exist. I'm fortunate that I'm in the New York City metro area. So a lot of my students actually do go out and do like modern band or technology or guitar or a lot of secondary general because we don't have a lot of we have marching band programs, but it's not kind of like Kentucky. So and then for K-12 teachers, if the goal is to facilitate lifelong music amateurs or appreciators or students for whom we don't want them to graduate our class and be like, well, I don't have a musical bone in my body. If that's our goal, then we're going to be more inclusive of popular music classes, music technology classes, listening clubs, after school ukulele jams, fill in the blank thing, because our whole goal is not about my ensemble as the director. It's about what are the musical experiences that are going to stay with these students. Most of our friends in high school band, like Martina's doing now, they took their clarinet and they put it under the bed or they put it in the closet and they don't touch it again because high school band participation for most students is an experience that ends in the 12th grade if they make it that far, and then they don't engage anymore. And then as an adult, you hear them say things like, I used to be a musician because I used to play clarinet in band. I'm no longer a musician because I don't play clarinet anymore. Like the people's ideas of musicianship are tied to participation in an ensemble. Whereas if we can get them to use technology to create, to be a songwriter, to play ukulele and sing around the campfire, whatever, they're more likely to be lifelong music makers. But if we're interested in lifelong musicianship, we've got to engage in the instruments that people are using in society throughout their life. The number one selling instrument every year for the last 50 years has been guitar, one, and then some type of keyboard instrument, piano, number two. So if we're not using those instruments in school, then we're not actually seriously engaging in ideas of lifelong music making because I don't get together with friends to play my trombone unless ska music comes back and I join a ska band.
Fourth way.
So these are all things that I think are encouraging to think about because we're at a time now, and I talk too much. Martina knows this well about me. So you're going to have to go through and be like, find the beef jerky and just edit him all out. Like 20 years ago, a lot of students would get access to music through music class. 25 years ago. Yes, the radio and tapes, but you still had to buy an album that was $15 or $16. Well, we all know that's not the case anymore. Like our students come to us with the entire recorded history of human song in their pockets at any given time. They don't need us to access music. They have recording studios in their pockets. They can collaborate and share and create without us as music educators. And so the kind of approach to music education of like, well, I'm the music teacher, you are empty vessels, I will fill you with my musical knowledge. Like that's never been how it should be, but that certainly doesn't work or resonate with students now because they have unlimited access to music. They're creating and editing and making their TikTok videos and all those sort of things. They don't need us to provide an access into music. So if we're, as a music education profession, just operating as though we are the gateway to access to musical experience, then more and more students are going to be like, well, that's the thing that doesn't resonate with me. And we see that, maybe not in Kentucky and Texas with like large marching band programs, but we see that in a lot of other places where our traditional ensemble participation is kind of dwindling. The orchestras that Martina mentioned a few minutes ago, we have fewer and fewer professional orchestras because those are ensembles that generally have to be propped up through support from like foundations because they're not financially viable as like, I buy tickets and that's enough to pay everything. Like we've got to really be thinking about what is the goal of a music education, who should have access to it, who's musical, all of those questions, because that is something in our lifetime. Even guitar might not be the thing students want to do anymore, and so we've got to be it's got to be about the approach and the pedagogy, not let me get you really good at the clarinet and hope that that's the thing that's going to serve you forever.
I think about orchestras a lot because where they are very popular and prominent is in movie scores in video game scores. Kids are way into video games. Minecraft has beautiful music, and that's not orchestra, but I just like thinking about like what is the role beyond the traditional that this ensemble is actually doing right now, and I feel like teachers aren't tapping into that at all. And the orchestras that are surviving, I know Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra probably gets a lot of support, but they've done like music from The Legend of Zelda, and it was packed. And then they would do like music from The Nightmare Before Christmas, packed. Music from The Red Violin, packed, because movies is such a prominent part of the
It's
soundscape for kids and families.
nostalgia. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I just see so many possibilities for orchestras, and I just feel like even in that realm, we limit everything so much. Like they're not paying attention to what's actually happening around them. So that's a huge sidebar,
Yeah.
but that's always like
No,
frustrating me.
That's like my whole thing right now is like I had a talk with my students the other day, 8th grade. They got me on this subject. We started talking about how much of video games influences music taste. And I told them, like, for me, Tony Hawk Underground on my little GameCube, you know, you had like a track. You could go in there and like click off songs, but most of the time you're just skateboarding, listening to like they had Johnny Cash on there. They had some like ska music. The first time I hear that, they have rap. They have like a range of it, and you're just listening to this, you know, because you don't choose what's on that game at the time. And so I think that had a huge influence on my music taste. And I've talked with students, like they bring up Minecraft. They bring up, oh, this music that we're listening to today sounds very similar to it. And they'll always reference a game.
So we've had quite the run, and we've hit many topics. I think this begs for a part 2 one day.
Yes.
But if someone heard this for the first time and this is their first exposure, could either of you say what the next step is? What's the organization they need to join? What's the website they need to go to? What do they need to YouTube? What would be the next step after this video?
I would say I think the 2 organizations to join and keep an eye on would be Little Kids Rock and the Association for Popular Music Education. Little Kids Rock has a ton of resources. APME is working on theirs. Both have conferences annually. They're both very valuable. APME is a little more geared toward higher ed and professionals there, even though both groups will cover both. I think they're valuable in different ways. So that I would say that's one way to go.
Yeah, and popularmusiceducation.org is APME's website, littlekidsrock.org, and all of Little Kids Rock's resources are free. You don't have to be a trained teacher. They also, increasingly, this is an opportunity out of COVID times, do online workshops that you can join at no cost to you. They're free, and you can check them out. And I honestly think that the next step for whoever's listening to this is just kind of think about, like, what are the baby steps to the baby steps, to quote someone I heard 12 minutes ago. Like where do you maybe want your program to go, and you realize, like, I can't get there this semester, I can't get there this month, I can't get there overnight, but like what's something you could do this coming week that's making a step in that direction. So if you're a band, choir, and orchestra person, maybe it's talking to your students about the music that they want to play and figuring out if you can kind of integrate that. Maybe it's connecting, like if you have, like, I mean, in New York, we always have symphonies that are playing like the Harry Potter music, or John Williams will conduct like all the Star Wars music. And those are always the most popular things, but you can watch those online. So maybe bringing those in as examples to connect to popular culture. Just thinking, like, what are the small steps that I can do to head in the direction of inclusion, equity, diversity, all of those sort of things. And just to repeat what I said earlier, you don't have to be the expert to bring in. You don't have to be an expert ukulele player or guitar player to bring it into the classroom. There's so many YouTube videos. There's so many organizations like Little Kids Rock. There's communities on Facebook of people who are doing this that you can join. Just like start somewhere and be like, all right, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to introduce beat making and I'm going to figure it out, and then kind of work forward from there. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to Titi Talk for other important informational tidbits.
For your ears.
Incredible.
All the good things. And that's what, I'm like, so I don't know. I feel like every time I'm around either one of you, I'm just like inspired. So I think that it's realizing that you got to start somewhere. You got to start by talking to people, getting outside of your bubble. And that was like my hope for Titi Talk, is to start creating just like a group of like-minded people that are outside of the box. And I don't know, I'm just like super appreciative that you took your Sunday to talk to the people and get the things into their ears and their mind
Oh
fuzz.
yes, talk to the people.
Thank you so much for sticking around with us. We appreciate you listening to the whole episode. I know we had fun. I'm hoping you did too. I'm Tyler Swick.
And I'm Jordan Smith.
I'm Martina Vasil.
And I'm Bryan Powell.
This has been Titi Talk, a music education podcast. We'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Well, that went well.
Yeah, for sure, dude.